Welcome to the Landmark Theater's Q&A podcast. In this podcast, you will hear a discussion with director Pablo Larraín, screenwriter Noah Oppenheim, and producer Juan de Dios Larraín from the film Jackie, moderated by the playlist Gregory Elwood, recorded at the Landmark in West Los Angeles.
Noah, you wrote this screenplay, I believe, almost 6 years ago? Almost 5 years ago?
Yeah, 6 years, yeah.
And what was your initial inspiration to even tackle this material?
You know, I've been an admirer of Jackie Kennedy and fascinated by her for a long time. You know, and I work in television news, so I'm particularly sensitive to the ways in which political figures and other public figures manipulate the public's perception and create mythologies. And I thought that there's probably no better example of that in modern history than what Jackie Kennedy did in that week after her husband's death to construct the Camelot mythology that we now also strongly associate with her husband's time in office. And so I thought this was a really rich moment in time. She's a really interesting person, and this issue of how politicians create these narratives that we buy into is particularly timely right now, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you first had this script and it went out, I know Darren Aronofsky was interested in directing at one point, but then he decided not to. And it took a while till Pablo came on board. Am I correct? You did not think actually this movie might ever happen?
Oh, I believed quite strongly it would never happen for sure. Yeah, I had given up all hope entirely. Darren was originally going to do it, and then he had an opportunity to go make Noah after the success of Black Swan, so he went and did that. And I would call and email him on a regular basis and whine and complain about why he wasn't doing anything with the script, and he would very patiently tell me, "I'm waiting for the right director." And that was a 4-year wait, but it was well worth it in the end, obviously.
So, Pablo, you met Darren actually just coincidentally at the Berlin Film Festival, correct? And can you talk about what that sort of meeting was like and how he sort of pitched Jackie to you?
Yeah, we had a movie in that festival. Darren was the head of the jury in Berlin Film Festival last year, and it was funny. We got an award, so there was like a party after the awards where everybody's like holding an award and a drink at the same time. It's pretty ridiculous. And Darren came to me and said, "What are you doing?" And then, you know, I have this script. Maybe you would be interested. And a week after, she sent me the script, and I read it. And then I went to Brooklyn, where their offices are. And you know, I'm from South America. I'm from Chile. We are from Chile. But the first question is, why you think a Chilean is good for this? You know, it's like. And he was like, maybe somebody that is not American who have an interesting take on her. And it was an interesting conversation, and I felt that I could have an interesting approach, not looking at someone who was, so important for me and my history and my background, but to look at a woman, you know, and that it was so special, so unique, and I started sort of. Like digging and doing some research. Basically, in Google, there's a lot of information, and of course, a starting point with Noah's wonderful script. And I fell in love with Jackie, and I couldn't believe how interesting and beautiful and how strong she was, because it feels that she was protected by the people that was around her. But I think the story is basically about someone that at the end was protecting everybody else. And that's what I think this is a story about a mother, mostly. And that's what I stick to it, yeah.
So the interesting thing about this story, though, is, so you're at the Berlin Film Festival last year. You're already about to shoot another movie, Neruda, which, by the way, when it comes out, you should see it's fantastic. It's Chile's foreign language entry this year. It's amazing. How did you, and this is to you as well, like, what made you guys think okay, we can do this, we can shoot these movies back to back and pull it off? Because I think for a lot of people who work in the industry, it's sort of like an amazing sort of accomplishment. Can you talk about the idea of shooting the movies within 1 year and such different sort of subject matters and how you made it all work?
Well, we spent 8 years working in Neruda. It's coming out in December 16th, so you're very invited. and, and yeah, it was very tough work. It's like a production between 5 countries, and it's an entire story. And while shooting Neruda, we structured Jackie. And films, this is from a production point of view, but also from a director point of view, movies are about opportunities. Like, you can design many things, but not everything. And when you have an invitation like Jackie, like, are you going to say no? It was an amazing project. It was difficult. We were 2 Chileans producing an American movie in Paris, because we shot 33 days in Paris. All the interiors you saw in the movie we built the White House. It's a replica 1-to-1 in Paris, and then we shot 10 days in Washington D.C. mostly the exteriors. So yeah, it was insane. Like, looking backwards, I don't know how we did it. We didn't sleep that much, especially Paulo. And yeah, we had 2 movies coming out, and this movie, The Club, the one that went to Berlin, was released in May this year in the States. So this gentleman here will be in the record Guinness book, because 3 movies directed by the same director will be released in the US in less than a year.
That's pretty awesome, actually. I didn't even realize that. So, Noah, a question for you. At the beginning, I know that Natalie had been interested in appearing in it when Darren was going to direct. When you were all these years, was it possible for you to think of anyone else to sort of star in it, or had you already sort of fixated in your mind that she would be the perfect Jackie no matter what?
I certainly thought that she would be perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult role, right? I mean, there's the baseline that has to be achieved, which is you have to believe that she's Jackie Kennedy just on a physical level, and people are so familiar with Jackie Kennedy, so just the sort of impersonation piece of it is just kind of the price of entry, and then the ability to capture that emotional roller coaster that she goes through, and also even more difficult, the subtle nuances of how she relates to the people around her depending on the circumstances. I mean, in the movie, she has one face that she presents to the men who occupy the White House and ran her husband's administration and run the Johnson administration. She's got another face that she presents to Nancy Tuckerman, her old friend, another face to the priest, another one to the journalist, and she's kind of constantly sort of shifting through those masks, like she shifts through those dresses in that sequence. And so for an actress to be able to do all of that, that's a really, really short list, and I think, in my mind at least, Natalie was always at the very top of it. So.
Pablo, can you talk about working with Natalie and what your collaboration was like?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. When I met Darren in the same meeting, I showed up and said, "Well, I will only make this movie if Natalie Portman does it." And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And like everybody thought the same before, so I felt ridiculous. But anyway, yes. What happens is that what is very interesting if you dig into Jackie and you realize that. If you go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you will see there are, I don't know, hundreds of biographies, and there are literally millions of pictures out there, and articles and TV stuff. And even though it feels that, we know very little about her, and she remains very mysterious, and there's something that is very interesting and very good for cinema, that is an enormous amount of mystery around her. And Natalie can do that very, very well. And maybe she has it, and I don't know, but on camera, at least, for sure, she could be very mysterious, even though you're very close to her. That's why there's so many close-ups on the film, because sometimes you think mystery in cinema, you would achieve it when, I don't know, you have a back shot, or you are behind, or you don't see that person very well. But what happens if you're really, really close, and then you will sort of unveil something, but no, it's even more mysterious, and Natalie has that on her eyes. And if you look at Jackie Kennedy's photos, this is what happens to me at least. She felt very mysterious all the way, and that's why we work with Natalie, and that's what's my approach, to try to expose her in a way that any one of us would complete the film. I think that's what I love about cinema. I'm not very interested in the cinema that sort of give me all the answers. and I don't know what I'm doing as an audience. I want to think, I want to feel, and I want to complete what is being shown to me. I want to be part of the process, and I think that's what we work very hard on, and sort of create like some kind of a cosmic mystery that then the audience will finish it by after their own biography, their age, their knowledge, their feelings, their emotions, their political beliefs. And again, just going back where we started, I think the key in here, this is very personal, I think it comes down to the story of a mother, and we can all relate to that figure somehow.
So, Juan, a question for you. I know you guys shot in Paris. What were the benefits of shooting there as opposed to shooting it all in the U.S. or maybe somewhere else?
Well, the company behind Jackie is called Wildband. They're based in France, and this movie was done with a tax rebate incentive in France. That was important. Then we were editing Neruda in Paris, the movie. Natalie used to live in Paris, now she's living here, but back then she was living there. So there were many reasons, and the head of departments were French, so we ended up there.
But I think you were telling me the other night there was benefits because when you guys recreated the White House, some of the original textiles and everything had been saved. Yeah. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah. So what happened when I was going to say Natalie, when Jackie went to the White House, they made this restoration they refers in the film, and they hired she had a team, and one of the designers was French. So a lot of the things that Jackie sort of used in her restoration came from France. So Jean Rabas, who is the production designer of this film, went to some of those companies who would have kept the stamps or the sort of things, and they remade them for us, like in the same thing. So we would walk into the set, and it was literally the same set, and it would look just like the White House. And not everything, but most of it we were able to have them made them again, because it was Jackie Kennedy, so they kept the sort of the stamp, and it was pretty amazing to be there because it made it so real. And sometimes movie sets are very, they're very fake, and everything has just one side. You can look at things from one angle, and everything here was made in a very realistic way. Same with the costume. Madeleine Fontaine worked in this very iconic, not just the pink one, but most of the dress that she wore came from the companies that actually provide those dresses back then to Jackie. Most of them were French, like Chanel and Dior and all those companies. So we were able to have those fabrics, and we sort of cut them for Natalie and for the rest of the actors. So it was, I don't know. She was Jacqueline Bouvier. She was her father was French, and she studied in France, and she was fluent in France, and she had a very strong influence from the French culture. So there was a bridge. There was a lot of connections in between Jackie and France. So it was good to be there.
Yeah, that's really awesome. One question before we take questions from the audience. From Noah, was there one thing when you were researching her life and working on the screenplay that surprised you the most, and maybe made it into the screenplay?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most surprising thing for me was the bedrock of the screenplay, which was the fact that Jackie Kennedy created the Camelot myth in this interview that she gave 1 week after the assassination. I had always assumed that people referred to the Kennedy administration as Camelot from the time he was running, or certainly during their time in office. And when I realized that she had, just days after her husband's death, summoned this journalist to her home and more or less dictated this article in which she dubbed the administration Camelot, I was just stunned that she had the presence of mind to do that amidst the trauma and grief and turmoil of that period. And also that she had the savvy to realize that, if she was going to give this interview and sort of have the last word, she could have said any number of things to the journalist. She could have said to him, my husband saved the world from nuclear annihilation in the Cuban Missile Crisis. She could have just rattled off whatever she saw as his policy accomplishments, but she intuitively realized that people would forget all of that, but they'd remember this cultural reference, this idea of Arthurian legend, and it stuck with us for decades and will probably remain for decades more.
So the question was whether Pablo referred to some European directors for the aesthetic for this film.
Oh, no, I understand the question. I only refer to her. I had no clear influences. That might be, but it's hard for me to say. Of course, many of you, I'm sure, people that love cinema, and I see a lot of cinema, but no, I think just this perspective was all the way on her. If you know the Warren Commission, there's the commission that actually investigated, and they made a report after all this event happens back in the 60s, and if you read it, whoa.
Someone was on the commission.
Yeah, on the Wine Commission. Yeah. Okay, so the Warren Commission report would read that it would explain very graphically how was President Kennedy assassinated and the bullets and all that, and after that would say that Jacqueline Kennedy, his 34 years old wife, was sitting next to him. So the whole point of Noah's idea and the whole point that we took was what would happen if we think that he was sitting next to her. So that would be our perspective. So that's why the assassination is pretty harsh, because we're from her. And the entire process is from her perspective. So was there any influence here? Yes. It's Jackie, and it's her and her eyes and her sort of her will to take the entire country's grief and put her on her back and walk and push and go all the way and make it happen and create the mythology and protect his children and became a mother.
Did you, whether during that period, whether you thought she had a breakdown or a personality order, sort of like while that was all going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think today we would say she had PTSD. I mean, again, just to put it in strictly human terms, if you're next to your husband and his head is blown off and you're showered in his, I mean, yeah, I would say that the fact that she was able to function at all and do what she did in terms of designing that funeral and appearing in public with the dignity and grace that she did is a testament to her extraordinary inner strength, because I think most of us would probably just crawl up in a hole. In terms of the addiction piece, I don't think any of us intended to suggest she was an addict. I mean, it is documented historical fact that the White House physician was obviously providing her sedatives at certain moments during that week, as, again, anyone who's been through a traumatic loss is sort of common practice. But to me, I mean, her fragility and her trauma pales in comparison to her strength, at least for me. I mean, the idea that she did what she did, took care of those kids, as Pablo said, sort of took care of the entire country. And when you consider what she experienced, I would say that it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I would like to add something. What happens is that when you observe somebody, when that person is alone and on their privacy, usually that person looks like their behavior is weird. Like, I bet you guys, I'm a filmmaker, if I go and follow you alone, any of you guys, you will, and I project that in here, you could look really weird and like dangerous people. And we're just alone. And that loneliness is what creates that sort of incredible sensation that we're looking at observing someone doing something that is strange. But we do strange things alone. We do that. We know that. We just don't do it next to anybody. And that's why it feels that she's doing something that is strange, but she's just alone.
The question was whether the journalist character played by Billy Crudup was based on someone in particular.
Yeah, he's definitely a composite. I mean, Theodore White, William Manchester, Arthur Schlesinger. I mean, she gave interviews to a variety of people during this period and in the sort of months and years after. The Camelot interview specifically was given to Teddy White for Life magazine, but the dynamic that we depict in those scenes and that character is supposed to, sort of capture the way she related to the press and historians who interviewed her, and the fact that she exercised an extraordinary amount of control over those conversations always. I mean, if you listen to the Schlesinger tapes that have been released, she's always telling him to stop recording. And if you look at transcripts, there are heavily redacted sections, and there are still boxes and boxes of documents at the Kennedy Library. They all had various provisions about when they could be released. There was a big release when she passed away, but there was still a ton under seal. So she just was always very conscious about how she would be perceived.
Pablo, the question is, knowing that most of the public had seen her in a certain way, was that maybe one of the ideas behind the film to sort of, pull back the mask and sort of show like her emotional feelings at that time?
So true. She never cried in public, and I guess that's the point of the film. Just there are many Jackies in here, and Noah Script had it from the very beginning. And there's a public Jackie. Natalie always talk about this. She would talk in a very specific way when she was in public. She would talk in another way when she was on TV, as you saw, and then she would behave completely different in a private place. So there's a lot of historical record. So we know. And we knew what happened very, exactly in terms of timing, hours, minutes, who were there, what they do. But then once they're behind doors, nobody knows what happened, and that's our job. That's where fiction comes, and where you can make a movie. And of course, when we were filming, at some moments we were like, it was designed, like written, that we were going to cry. Some other moments, just Natalie was just crying, and we shot it, and it's an emotional thing that I don't know if she did it. We will never know. Did she walk around the White House like trying different dresses, drinking Russian vodka? We don't know really. But did it mean something for us? Yes. She goes to his room, play the record, then start trying dresses and gather around. That's the fiction. That's her job. And I remember we were shooting in the plane, and she's cleaning the blood from her face, and Natalie started crying. I didn't say anything to her. Just clean your face and see what happens. And she started crying, and she couldn't stop. And I remember I ran into the camera. We shot on film, so it has a limited amount of minutes that you can shoot. And I looked at the meters, and we had enough. We had 10 minutes left. And so I keep rolling. And she cried for 5 minutes. And we record that, and it's on the film. Did that happen like that? I don't know, but it works.
Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you all for coming tonight, and see the movie again.
You have been watching the Landmark Theater's Q&A podcast. For further in-depth discussions with filmmakers, be sure to check out the other Q&As available on our channel from past films. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all our bonus content. Thanks for watching.